we are going to look at how to create a drop-down menu in Figma. All right. So what's a drop-down menu? Well, it's this guy right here. See when I hover over, a dialog box appears, and we get, the option to have navigation list items, and they have a nice effect when I hover over them. Right, the color changes. Notice how when I hover over drop-down, that I get a nice bar underneath, and that just tells me, hey, this is the active item. This is something that you can click on, and when you click, this is the thing that's gonna get activated, right? That's why we have these underlines, and we have a little arrow, right, pointing down. When the arrow points down, that means, hey, something's gonna come down when you activate this area. And of course, the arrow goes up, and that means that when you leave, the thing that went down will now go up. So the arrow points in the direction that action will happen. And then we have these list items with the background that highlights them. And this just, helps the user focus on the item that they choose to focus on, first of all, by putting their mouse over it, right? Makes it easier to read whatever it is and verify that what they're about to click on is actually the thing they want to click on, okay? One other thing I'll mention is that this drop-down menu is huge, obviously. You wouldn't have a menu you probably wouldn't have a menu this big on a website. I've got it oversized so you can see, so that there's no having to zoom in and zoom out, okay? So that's why this is so big. All right, I'm gonna jump back into Figma, and these ones here are powering the preview. So I'm just gonna delete them, and we're gonna build it from scratch. Awesome. First thing I want to explain is these things called components, okay? Components. Components are like a special kind of element here in Figma, and they're kind of like groups, kind of, because a component can be made up of different parts. A component can have text and a square and an arrow, right? Those and an underline. All those things can be in one component. So in a way, components are groups. All right, and components also have variants. Okay, now a variant of a component it's like, as far as the computer is concerned, it's the same component, but it has a different way of appearing, or it has a different style, let's say. Style means things like color and size and font weight and things like that. So imagine, thinking back on our drop-down menu, right? We had the word all Microsoft, and we had it with and without an underline. We had it with the arrow pointing up and with the arrow pointing down. That's one component with a arrow down, no underlines variant, and the same component with another variant where the arrow is pointing up. And we're just going to tell Figma that whenever the mouse goes over, it has to switch from one variant to the other, and whenever the mouse is not on top of it, it switches back from that variant to the default variant. Okay, so that's the basic principle we will execute. So the first thing to do is start drawing out that component, okay? There's a lot of ways to do this, okay? You can start by drawing the default version. So I can start by just writing all Microsoft, right? And then adding the arrow and then making this a component and then making a variant, which would just be a duplicate of this, and then adding to it. But I find it a little hard to modify an existing component to add to it. So I'd had to add the arrow, I would have to add the underline. That's a little tricky. So what I prefer to do actually is draw the hover state, draw the more complicated one first, all right? And then once I make it a component, I'll just delete the things I don't want. So I'll delete the underline and I'll modify the arrow. Okay, So let's get going for real now. Don't draw on your design. Okay, don't draw on the frame that you're using for your design. Draw over on the pasteboard. So do not draw a box like this. Okay. Type in Microsoft. Okay, don't do that. We don't want to do that. We just want to get our text tool and tap. All right. The reason is, if we draw a box, okay, and I write Microsoft, okay, this box, like this edge, will be part of our component, which means when people hover over here in this area, even though they're nowhere near the text, it's gonna say, oh, you're hovering over the item. Time to make the drop down appear, and we really don't want that. So we're just gonna get the text tool and tap, and type in Microsoft. Okay, or if you want to make this generic, let's just type in nav item. Okay, nav item, and we're gonna we can change this later. We can always change the text. So cool. It says nav item. That's great. And I want that little arrow. So there's many ways to draw an arrow. I can use the arrow tool. I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to draw a line. Okay, so draw a line. And then I'm going to get my design tools. And I'm going to make sure there's a stroke. Okay, we'll make it, I don't know, 6 point, 7 point. Again, these numbers are bigger than they should be. I'm just doing it to make it visible. And then I'm going to add, if you don't see these options here, you may need to click the 3 dots to get more options. Okay, and I'm going to add a line. Okay, and cool. So I'm going to combine these. Well, let me show you. First, I'll do it wrong. Okay, first I'm going to do it wrong. I want to get that underline. So I'll just draw a rectangle like this underneath, and I'm going to fill it black. Okay, so remember we can use auto layout. We can use auto layout to, make things go in a row or make things go in a column and just keep our design organized. I want to use auto layout for this design, but there's a small problem with that right now, which is that I want this beside nav item, right? I want this arrow beside nav item, and I want this underneath. Okay, but the way auto layout works is it either wants to do everything in a row or it wants to do everything in a column, right? So maybe I'll just make it an auto layout and show you. So let's press Shift A. Okay, Shift A will make an auto layout. Okay, so you can see now it's become a frame, and we can observe that the auto layout has got things running down, so like in a column, and it's also got everything aligned to the left. We can change it, right? I can say, no, I want it aligned to the right, or I want everything centered, right? We can do those. We can add space between our items, lots of options. But the point is, this isn't really what we want, right? It's not what we want. What we can do, though, is put an auto layout inside an auto layout. Okay, so I'll show you visually what I'm going to do. I'm going to make these guys a group, nav item and this. And I'm going to make this auto layout be in a row. Okay. And then I'm going to put that auto layout inside another auto layout so that my nav item, which is grouped up, with my arrow, can be in another auto layout, this big one here, the darker line, right? With this inside it as well. And we'll set this auto layout to arrange everything in a column. All right, and that'll give us the look we need. So I'll select my arrow and nav item, and I will press Shift A. Okay, so now these are in an auto layout. And by the way, did you notice how, it grabbed this and sort of tidied it up, like centered it for me? Watch. Shift A is the key. Let's turn on Keycaster. Shift A, right? And here you can see my arrow is down and I want it centered, but that's just because our auto layout tools are telling it to go down, right? We want it to be centered. All right. One nice thing about this is you can see, like, if this grows and shrinks, the auto layout will like keep that arrow in the same spot, which is pretty cool. We want that, right? All right, so we got this. That's good. Now I want to select this thing, this entire auto layout, right? Remember, auto layouts are frames. That's why it's called frame 13, because all auto layouts are also frames. Okay, and I'm going to select that and my underline. And now I'm going to turn these into an auto layout together. So we'll press Shift A. Okay, so I've got a frame here, right, with a frame inside and a rectangle inside. If yours looks like this, right, it just means your auto layout is set to go horizontal or in a row. We want to go vertical or in a column. So we'll just check that there. And then, maybe you want to adjust this area here and make them like left aligned, right? I'm going to do top left alignment, okay? Okay, amazing. So now we have like the foundation, and we can finally make that component I've been talking so much about. The shortcut for a component on Apple is Command Option K. And you'll notice as soon as I pressed Command Option K, it turned purple. Okay, I'm just going to undo that and show you another way to turn something into a component, which is just to click this button up here. So we'll click that, and you can see frame 14 has become a component. All right. Remember I said components are like groups, but they have variants, right? They can look two different ways, and we can set it up so that it looks one way when you're hovering and a different way when you're not hovering. Well, that's what we're going to do now. We're going to add a variant of frame 14 here. So this button right here will add a variant to your component. So we'll just click that. All right, cool. So now we got this dotted line, right? This dotted line. This is the frame of our variant. Okay, so everything, our component. So everything inside this frame is part of our component. And within the component, you'll see we got one here, one variant here, and another variant here, right? And they're showing up in our layers panel. This is actually a great time to name it. I'm going to name this component. And actually, what am I going to name it? I think I'll name it nav item. Because this is the component for our nav item, right? We could use this for like any of these nav items if we wanted to, right? We would delete the arrow because we don't always need the arrow, but this could be like the basis for all of our future elements. It's also a good time while we're renaming things to rename these two, or at least one of the variants. Okay, so we have default. I'm fine with that. Default is fine, the default look. But variant 2, this really doesn't tell us anything useful. Okay, in this case, you might not care because you're like, well, it's active and not active, right? It's hover state or not hover state. On a big project, you might have active, hover, inactive, hidden, emphasis, right? There's all these different variants that you may have. So get in the habit of naming them, and it will just make your life easier. So I'm going to double click this. Okay, and we'll say property 1 equals. After the equal sign, I'm just going to write active. Okay, and then press enter. And you can see now it's nicely named. We have our defaults variant and our active variant. By the way, you can also name them over here, right? So whatever variant you've selected will show up as the current variant, and you'll see the same thing, property 1, and then you'll see something like active, right? remember by default it said variant 2, right? So if I change this to variant 2 over here, you'll see it's the same. So now this one went back. It's the same, we're changing the same thing. There's just two different ways to change it. I'm gonna put it back to active. Awesome. Now, remember I said rather than try to draw it in here and then, rather than try to, add things while we're in the component, while we have a component, trying to add the underline and flip the arrow and all that, I said it was too complicated. Well, this is where that's gonna pay off. Because now I just need to select this bar here and delete it. And I just need to rotate this arrow, okay? We've got groups in groups, right? We've got frames in frames here. And that really makes things hard to edit. But deleting something is a lot easier to edit something. So let's start with deleting it. I want to delete the black rectangle from our default state. So you could click and click and click and spend your whole life clicking, getting frustrated, right? And you'll notice, like, if you move things here, like they vanish, they're not in the frame, right? And then you might make this bigger, and like that's super frustrating sometimes because then you forget to shrink it back down. That's why we don't want to edit things in here. But we do need to do some editing, which, as I've been saying, is let's get rid of this rectangle. So here it is. We can just select it over here, right? Look, here's our nav item, right? What's nav item? This thing here. Okay, so here it is in our layers panel. And if we slide down, we can see, okay, default state. Well, that's the one where I want to remove the underline. So we'll click that. And then if I click this little arrow here, it will go down. Okay. And I can find that rectangle. Here's the rectangle. I can just delete it. And now, you know what? I want to rotate this, don't I? I want to rotate this up. I'm going to do the exact same thing to select it. I'm not going to bother trying to select it here on the pasteboard. I'm just going to come over to active, and I'm going to twirl down those options. And I'm going to find this guy here, line 1. So now it's selected. And I can just come on over, hover over, and I'll get the rotate tool. And I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to spin it up. Okay, sweet. So at this point, the design work is sort of done, and we have to do the prototyping work. Okay, so we've got one component. The component is called nav item. There are two variants of nav item: default variant, active variant. Prototyping means connecting those variants and then programming, let's say, a user action to make the variant switch from one to the other, right? Go from default state to active state and back to default state. So let's do that now. Prototype mode is over here. We get a whole different set of tools. I'm going to click on nav item. And then there's two ways to go about this. I can either click the plus to add an interaction, okay? Or I could select this blue and white plus symbol and drag a wire. And you'll see I can drag this anywhere, but the place I want to drag it to is my active state. So I'll drag it and release, and then this dialog box pops up, okay? Because I connected them, because I dragged to connect, it already kind of knows something that I want to do. It knows that I want to change this variant to the active variant. So the only thing I need to do is tell it when. Like, when do you want Figma to change this to the active variant? Do you want it when someone clicks on it? Or do you want it when someone drags on it or hovers on it, or some other option? You might think we want to use hover, but we're not going to, okay? We're going to use mouse enter, okay? mouse enter. What does that mean? It means when the mouse enters this purple box, right, the border boundary box of our variant, it means when the mouse enters it, it will change to active state. The reason we don't want to use while hovering is because when we get a drop-down menu, right? When we get a drop-down menu, let's say we add a drop-down menu to nav. Nav is going to become much larger, right? Sorry, not nav, our active state. It's going to become much larger. And the drop-down menu is going to fill in this area here, right? But our default state stops. This is the lower limit of our default state, which means when I go into nav and I come down here to use my nav items, my mouse is no longer hovering over this narrow purple box. So we have to use mouse enter. Okay, so when the mouse enters this, it will switch to the nav item state. Let's see what that looks like right now. Okay, don't worry, you don't have to do what I'm about to do. This is purely for demonstration. We'll do the rest later. So I'm going to hit play. Okay, so I hover over and you can see it never goes away, right? It never goes back. So my mouse is here. If I take my mouse away, it never goes back because as soon as my mouse entered, it switched and it never switches back. Okay? That means, that's telling us that we have a little bit more work to do. I'm going to tuck this back up. What we have to do is say when the mouse leaves this nav item, active state of nav item, we want to connect back to the default state. So the interaction details are when the mouse leaves, change to default. Okay? Change to default. Okay, now let's see if that's working. Something that you should be aware of, if you try to use copy and paste right now, you might get some problems. So I'm gonna. This is what I want, right? I want to get this onto my website. If I copy and paste, look, I've actually created a whole new variant. I don't want a new variant, right? I want a copy of this component, right? I want a copy of this, actually this specific component variant. I don't want to make a new one. I don't want to make a new variant. I want a copy of this variant. And when you select it this way and just press copy paste, that's what you end up doing. And then look, when I drag that out, I've actually created a whole new variant. Like this is a whole new component, sorry. And it's tricky because it has that name variant 3, but it's not really a variant of nav item. Okay, it just got that name automatically assigned to it because it used to be a variant. And this will not do what you want it to do long term. So we're going to delete that. And I'm going to show you a safe way to copy the component variant that you want. Copy, Command C or Control C, get it on your clipboard. And now you want to select the artboard that you're pasting it on, the frame that you're pasting it into. So in this case, I want to paste it onto my home frame. So I'm literally going to click on home. So now it's selected. And now when I paste it, now we've got what we need. Okay, look, this is not a variant. Okay, it's a copy of that one. And actually, the technical term for this is an instance. Let me turn these grids up, these columns off. You see the diamond shape that we're looking at here? That diamond tells us it's an instance, not necessarily just a copy. It's an instance. And an instance means it will inherit any changes that happened with the original. So watch. I'm going to select this here, and I'm going to change the color on this one, and you can see the color of this one changes too. Okay. I can change the text, and the text on that one will change as well. Okay, this is like fundamentally important, because the idea is, if I have more than one page, suppose I have my home page, right, and I have my, let's just say, my about page, okay, and I decide I need to change something about my menus, right, like even maybe it's even like the font style. I can do that, and it will change on, every single page. Again, that might not sound like a big deal. We're working on a 4-page assignment. If you have like a 30-page assignment, or a 40-page, project, or you have a mobile version, a desktop version, and a tablet version, it's a big deal. It's a huge time saver. Okay, and it's not just one item, right? You might have one that is nav item, and you might have another one that, I'm sorry, you wouldn't have any that are nav. Let's say you have one that is Teams, and let's say you have one that is Windows, right? And let's say you have another one that is Surface, right? Like literally all of these guys up here, if you have one for each of them, and you need to change it, I just hope you can start to see what the point of all this is, why it's so much quicker. Okay, and good. So I'm just going to delete these, and I'm going to show you one more way to get yourself an instance, right? An instance of this default, an instance of this component in the default state. Hold down Option or Alt on Windows and Option on Apple. Hold it down, click, and hold the mouse button down on your nav item here, and drag it onto your artboard. And then you can let go. And that also will create an instance. I know it's an instance because look, it's got this empty diamond. Okay, it's got this empty diamond. Whoops. Whereas the original one has a full diamond. Okay, that's how we know when something is an instance of a component and when it's the component itself. All right, let's check this out and see if it's working. I always like to check frequently to see if things are working, because if things stop working, and you've done a lot, you might not be able to track where they went wrong. So I check frequently. All right, that's done. Great. You know what though? I kind of want it to look a little cooler. Like, whoops, I shouldn't have deleted that. Let's bring it back. I want it to look a little cooler because it just like kind of happens, right? Maybe I can animate it. So let's go back to our prototype mode. And I'm gonna click on this wire because that's kind of what's controlling the animation. And I'm gonna find the animation area, and I'm gonna change it from instant to smart animate. Ease out, that just means like the speed will not be constant. Like, when a car accelerates and slows down, it like gains speed and then drives at a constant speed and then slows down slowly. It doesn't just like immediately hit full speed and then immediately stop. It doesn't matter if it's a car or a bird or even yourself when you're running, right? Things in nature have like a speed curve. They slowly ramp up and then they hit peak speed and then they slowly slow down. So that's all easing means. It creates a more natural look. And then this is the duration. So 300 milliseconds is 0.3 seconds. Okay, so it's 1,000. So 1,000 would be 1 second. And then let's grab the other wire and let's change that to smart animate. I'm just going to leave the defaults. And now, that's kind of nice, right? It does this little animation, spinny. Smart Animate is kind of Figma guessing at what it thinks you want it to do. So it's usually pretty good. Sometimes it won't do what you want it to do, but it's usually pretty good. Okay, cool. So now we have our nav item, and I hope you're sort of realizing it's repeatable, right? So I can Alt or Option drag this out, right? And I could call this, let's just say you're doing a website, right? Home, and let's delete that there. Okay. Home. I'm using the Alt drag tool. Home, about, I don't know, what else do we need? Contact, right? Say you need these on your website. I can bring them on. Right, and they're all gonna work. Oh, looks like I would have had to adjust that line to make them work properly. So for those, we may have to do like this. For this style, sorry, home, grab the rectangle. I'm just grabbing it up here. Okay, I almost made a mistake. So I'm still in prototype mode, right? And that's kind of making it hard for me to resize things. So let's go to design mode. And now I can easily resize this. And I guess we don't need these anymore. All right. So now you can make all these buttons. Home, about. I think you get the idea, right? And then once again, we want to option drag these onto our web pages. Okay, and again, onto every one of our pages, right? And whenever we edit them here, it's going to edit them on both, right? We can test them. Let's just make sure that they're still working. Yep, they're still working great. Perfect. Okay, we'll delete these because I didn't actually want these. They're just kind of around. We're gonna delete these. Now I need to make my drop down. Okay, now I'm gonna make my drop down. Maybe I'll duplicate this. Okay, because this is kind of like the one that I would just want to keep copying over and over again. And I'm going to start a new one, and I'm going to call it nav item drop down. Okay, nav item drop down. And remember I said it's really hard to start, sometimes it's really hard to start drawing inside of this, right? And when I say drawing, I mean I need to add my little box with all my drop down items. It's hard to draw in a frame, in a component, in a frame, right? So I'm actually going to draw it over here, and I'm going to paste it into this, okay? And the thing I'm going to start with, I'm going to start from the smallest piece and build up to the main, to the full like drop down menu. Okay, what I mean by that is you might be tempted to say like, okay, I need the drop down, right? And then I need my list items. Okay, you might think, okay, this is how I'm going to build it, right? Starting with this big piece and then fleshing it out. And we're actually going to work the other way. First, I'm going to create my list item. And I'm going to build my way up to the main thing. And you'll see why that's beneficial. I'll make my list items a little bit smaller than my main nav heading. Okay, and this is actually going to be its own little component. Remember, I need it to be a component because I need to have two variants. I need one variant where it looks like this, and another variant where it has a black background with a clear inside. Okay, and you might say, okay, well, if I want to have a black background, I can just draw that. Right? I can draw this background, right? And I'll make it white, right? And then I'll position this inside of it. Whoops. I'll position this inside of it, and then I'll copy it, and now I'll make this one black. Whoop, nope, no shortcuts there. There we go. And this one white. Okay. The problem with that is, look, what if I have items of varying sizes? What if I have a list item, that is long, right? List item that is long. You can see that this is not stretching, right? So if we make a component this way, we have something really annoying. If you have like 20, 30 drop downs or items in one drop down, and you have 5 or 6 drop downs, this is a nightmare. Like you do not want to be doing this. So we're going to use our old friend auto layout to handle this. Delete that, get our list item here, and I'm going to press Shift A to make this an auto layout. Okay? Something that's interesting about auto layout is that it's kind of like a group, right? It's kind of like a group, but the sort of group box, I guess, that everything is in is its own little designable element, right? So if I make a group in Illustrator, right? Let's pretend we're in Illustrator. If I draw a rectangle and another rectangle, and I group them together, Command G, right? I have this boundary, right? I have this boundary. I can't treat that boundary like a shape, right? I can't give this boundary a fill color, right? I can't, it's kind of just telling me that these things are grouped together. When you make an auto layout, you have a boundary, but that boundary actually, it can have, we call it style on the internet. Style is color, font, size, rounded corners, drop shadows, that's style. It can have style, including background color. So when I click on frame here, look, it's like a group. Frame, it's got the list item inside of it. It's a group of one with one item in it, but it's still a group. So I'm going to select frame, not list item, not the text, frame, and I'm going to go to fill. I'm going to add a fill, a white fill. And you know what? I want something called padding. Padding is space between the contents of the container, the contents of the frame, and the edge of the frame. So like the edge of the frame is this blue line, right? And the space between right now is just this much. Okay, and the contents is this text. So I'm going to add padding. So if I hold down Shift and I put my mouse in this pink area and hold down Shift, not Shift, excuse me, Alt or Option, it will add it to like side to side. So you always want a little bit more padding side to side than you do up and down. So I'm going to do 30. Okay, and up and down, right now it's at 10, and you know what? I'm happy with that. And by the way, you can also change padding here and here. Right? We also have margin, which they call it spacing between items. In this case, that would be like space between. Well, I'll just show you. I'm going to copy this, Command C, Command V. So now we have 2 items, right? 2 things in our auto layout. We don't actually want to do this, but I just want to show you. If I use this, it's space between those 2. Okay? So anyhow, we're going to delete that and move on in life. Cool. All right. I'm going to now turn this into a component, because components have variants, and we want a black on white variant and a white on black variant, right? An active and a default. So that's Command Option K, or click on this icon. All right, so now we got frame 14. That's just the default name. We're okay with that for the moment. Okay, and then we need to now that we have this component, we can add a variant, which again, just click on this. And now we're going to style this variant to look like, the defaults, the active state. First thing I want to do, and actually, it's going to automatically target this text and, wait for you to just type in what you want to call it. So I'm going to call it active and just press enter. This is a good time to think about if you want to use naming conventions. So I've called this active, and I've called this also called active. It probably won't cause troubles, but when you get a big project, it can be nice to know exactly what you're looking at when you're seeing all of the different connectable bits. So maybe I'm actually going to call this list item active. And maybe I'll call this list item default. Okay, you don't have to, but I like to stay tidy because I just don't like being lost or confused. I like to know exactly what I'm looking at. All right, now we can change the colors on this. Again, a common thing is like knowing when you've selected the text and when you've selected the actual auto layout. Okay, or frame. Auto layouts are frames. So I like to select things here because it just makes my life easier. So select list item active, the frame here, and I'm going to change the color to black, and then I'm going to change the color of the text to white. Something that's kind of cool, when you select an auto layout, right, like this one here, it actually tells you the color of everything in it, the colors of everything in it. So I don't actually have this text selected. I have the auto layout that the text lives in selected. And it's showing me, okay, you're using black and you're using white. If I select white, it will change everything that's white, which right now, which right now is only the text. Which is, kind of cool, I think. Anyways. All right, excellent. So, you know what? Why don't we test this and make sure it works? Again, I'm going to hold down Alt on Windows or Option on Apple and drag a copy of this into my design and see if it works. Okay, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because I forgot to prototype it, didn't I? So delete that. We're going to go back. List item. Prototype. Let's do it the different way this time. Remember I said there's two ways? This time I'm just going to hit plus. And it says here's an interaction, okay? It's added one and it's just filled in some defaults. Click and none. So let's click on that. And interaction details, what are they? While hovering, we're going to use hover this time. It's okay to use hover this time. Navigate, change to, right? Remember, what are we changing? We're changing the instance. Sorry, we're changing the, not instance, the variant. We're changing from the default to the active variant, list item active variant. All right, now I'll select my list item active, and I'm going to add an interaction, and then I'll click on the added interaction, customize it, and the interaction details will be when someone hovers. Actually, I don't need to do that. Oh, no, I don't need to do anything else because it's only going to happen when hovering. So now let's drag this in. Hold down Alt or Option, Alt on Windows, Option on Mac, and just drag that in. Okay, and we're working fine. I don't want any fancy animations. I'm just going to leave it like this, working instant. All right, this is good news, okay? So I am now going to use this variant, okay, this component variant, the white one, list item default. I'm going to use this to build up my navigation like drop down over here. Okay, so let's tidy up a little, give myself some space to work. Okay, I'm gonna put this up here because it's kind of like related to this. All right, and I'm gonna use once again Option on Mac or Alt on Windows to drag this out. So this is now an instance. This is now an instance of this main component here, which, oh, I should name it. I'm going to name it list item. Okay, so this is now an instance of list item. The reason I deleted it and dragged it back out is because I wanted to automatically rename to list item. And I used Alt or Option to do that while dragging. But yeah, so I want to build up a drop-down menu. So what I'll do is, we know about auto layout, right? I know that auto layout can just make lots of, line up lots of things, and that's exactly what a drop-down menu is. It's a bunch of lined up list items. So I'm going to press Shift A. I've got this list item selected. I'm going to press Shift A to turn it into an auto layout. And I'm going to select my list, the list item that's inside my new auto layout, right? Frame 14. Yours might be a different number. This is the default name. Frame 14, that's my auto layout. And there's my list item inside it. I'm going to select it. And I'm just going to press Command D to duplicate it. Okay, so let's say that's how many items you want in a column. Okay, I don't know how many you'll want. Just press Command D until you get as many as you want. All right. And while I'm here, since this is a column, I'm going to call this list dash column. Okay, so it's a column full of stuff, list stuff. Okay. All right. Now, I don't like this gap here, so I'm going to select list column, and I'm going to go back to my design workspace, if you're not already there, and I'm going to change this. Remember, this is space between items. I'm going to make it 0. Okay. Maybe, why don't I put this onto the design so you can see what we just created. Okay, I think you get the idea. All right. I'm just going to bring it back up now. Okay, list column. You could, if you wanted to, you could make this a component. You could make this its own component if you think you're going to use it again and again and again. So you know what? Maybe I'll do that just to make that a thing. There's some reasons you might not want to do this, which is that if you're going to be making a lot of different numbers of list items, like if you don't know yet, are you going to have these that are 20 long or 10 long? You might find that you're constantly adjusting it by a significant amount. So that's a reason you might not want to make this a component. But you know what? I think I will. So I'll just press Command Option K. All right. And I need a variant of this, right? Because I don't want to edit the original. I want a variant of this. So I'll just copy and paste. One thing that's kind of tricky, when I copy and paste this, I'm going to press Command C, Command V. It has pasted directly perfectly on top. Look, here's our original one. I know it's the original because it has the 4 full diamonds. Here is our instance. So I'm going to use the arrow keys right now and look, just kind of shift it off. And sometimes people just kind of make a mess accidentally when they do this because they're like pasting more than one, or they're like pasting an instance of the component accidentally inside a component but it's perfectly aligned so they don't know. Okay, so things can happen, just be careful. All right, cool. All right, let's do one more thing. Let's take this and let's put this to the side here. Okay, so you know what? I think I've already made a mistake. Yeah, I made a mistake. So I wanted to put this guy beside so that I could have like a 2-column drop down. But if we look here, you can see when I line them up perfectly, see how they're lined up perfectly? There's this gap. That gap is the space between the content and the edge of the frame, which we know is called padding. Okay, but it's not such a big deal because look, I can go back to my original component, right, the main component, and I can find the padding and just take it away. And now, look at these guys. Hey, we're all good. Kind of nice, right? You know, something I'm noticing when I move these close together here, I feel like this distance, it's not quite enough. It's not quite enough. So let's see if we can do something about that. I'm gonna like jump back up the train of these components, right? Because remember, these guys here, right, are copies of this, which means whatever I do to this will happen to that. So that does mean I could probably, you know, make all of these bigger. See that? And the ones below will change. Okay. But actually, each one of these things, just one up there, is actually just this. So if I make these bigger, this will get bigger, and these will get bigger. All right. So let's just do that. I'll make it bigger, and you'll notice it's extending outside. These variants are extending outside the boundaries of the component. So I need to actually extend my component a little bit to accommodate them. And look, this is fixed, and this is fixed. Pretty neat, I think. And you know, we could actually we could customize these, of course. So I could write like, I don't know, hello world, I am new, and that can cause, you know, some issues, which, you know, kind of gives you, again, it kind of emphasizes the need to plan, you know, a little bit, even though these are flexible tools. Maybe what you do is when you draw out your nav menus, when you first plan them, you find out what's my longest word. Okay, so say it's like fashion, right? Maybe it's shoes. Running shoes is longer than sandals. So you would put running shoes in here, and you would size it up for running shoes, and then you know you're going to be good to go, and you're not going to run into any issues. Just something to think about, okay? But let's get back on track. Okay, what did we do here? We created these two. Now, I need to put these two inside this nav item here, right? I need them inside this active state, like part of that group. Before I do that, I'm actually going to turn these two columns into their own auto layout frame, because if I don't, when I put them in this auto layout frame, right, which is set to vertical or like columns, this guy is going to go down here. Now, actually, why don't I just show you? I'll show you exactly what will happen. I'll cut these, I'll go into my nav active, and I'll paste them in, and you can see, right, it's done that. So I mean, I could switch it, but then we get this problem, right, where we get everything going that way, which we also don't want. So let me undo back to before all that. But if I group these into their own frame, into an auto layout, so Shift A, now these are in their own auto layout, which is actually kind of nice, because look, if I hit Command D, it's just going to automatically add another one. And if I delete one, I can delete two, You know, I can add more. All of a sudden, this becomes kind of handy. Um, you know, something flexible. So maybe actually, this should be an auto layout, right? Because that makes this more customizable once I make a copy of it, right? But anyhow, we didn't do that. So let's just make this work. So I got this frame 14, and I need to add it to nav item dropdown. Um, so I could like click and click and click, you know, and get this on my clipboard with Command X, you know, cut, and click on this and hope that I'm pasting it in the right spot. I'll show you an example of making a mistake. So I'll cut this and I'll double click on nav item, and you can see I'm in the wrong frame, and I can paste it. Oh, oh dear. See, and like I don't know what's happening. I have pasted it. Let's see, where is it? Somewhere. I mean, I don't know where it's going, but okay, there it is. So, you know, that's definitely not what I wanted, right? So that kind of thing happens if you try to click on screen, and we really don't want that. So I'm just resetting. Let me show you how I recommend doing it. First, I'm going to make this big enough, right? I want to make this big enough that I can sort of see what happens. And then I want to use the layers panel, right? Enough of using mouse buttons and trying to like click through all these weird things, frames on frames. I'm just gonna get my list of columns, and I'm gonna drag it up until I see nav item dropdown active. That's this right here. Nav item dropdown active. Right? And I'm going to put it into that. Okay? And where do I want it? I want it below the rectangle. So I'll just grab it and put it below the rectangle. Okay? And now we can resize this. Right? And I also actually want to resize this, right? Because remember way back when we had to choose between hover and mouse leave and mouse enter. And remember we wired it up so that it was when the mouse leaves this purple box, right? Our nav item drop down active box. I need to extend that box so that we're not leaving the box just to get to our drop down. Cool. Whoops. Okay. I really do recommend getting used to the layers panel to do stuff. I'll just show you again how easy it can be. So here's my frame, right? I've got my frame 14 over here, and I want it to go inside nav item active variant. This is what I want. I'm going to drag it. Here's active. I know that that's what I need, and I know I need it after rectangle 10. Done. Okay, amazing. So let's get this in here. Let's get this into our design. Remember, if I copy and paste, it creates a new variant, okay, which is not what we want. We want to create an instance of this. And so I could copy it, Command C, and then click on my home frame and paste it. That works fine. Or you can use the drag option. Let's see if it works. All right, it's working just fine. There's some small issues. It looks like there's the tiniest gap. You know, the tiniest gap between some of these list items, and you know, I don't think that gap would exist if this was shrunk down. But you know, you can always do -1 pixel between items to tighten that up. Okay, so you know, we can maybe we should. So I hope that helps a little bit. we can scale everything down here. Okay, so what I'm doing here is the scale tool. So I press K to get my scale tool, and then I'm going to drag, well, I'll show you what happens. If I select just this and I scale it, I'm only scaling that, all right, which means I'm not scaling the variant, right, which causes it to grow, which, I don't know, maybe that could be useful, right? So I want to make sure that I scale the whole component. And again, this is another example of where using components wisely is such a lifesaver, because I just changed every single menu item on every single frame on my website with one little move. And I also scaled the nav menu and the container for the nav menu, a drop-down menu. All of these things have just been scaled. Make sure that you press escape to get out of the scale, because now every time I try to do something, it's going to want to scale. So you can press escape, and that will let you resize all your stuff. Okay. Maybe this should be smaller too. So here is an example of maybe a mistake I made. Maybe this here should have been an instance of this, right? That way, when I scaled this down, this stuff would have gotten smaller as well, right? So for now, I just unfortunately can't do that. So I have to manually scale these guys back, which, it's not like a huge deal. If you have to do that, something to think of to make sure you're getting it perfect, keep your eye on these numbers, because that's the height and width of this object. So 44.23. Maybe I can get something a little better. Okay, 45.13. Now I'm going to select this and this. Actually, I'd have to do just this. And what was it? 45.13. $45.132. So I think that's probably the best I'm going to get. Yeah. But the real answer here is to just be very careful with planning, so that you rough these things out and you get them right, the right size before you do all the animation, right? And that can just be as simple as, like what I've done here. I just went ahead and drew everything up, and then I would just use those point sizes as my reference point. Okay, so I hope this was a helpful tutorial on how to make a drop-down menu. Really sometimes it just takes practice. You just gotta kind of work on it and figure it out, and try again and again, and eventually you'll get it, and you'll wonder how you ever weren't able to. Okay, so thanks for watching, and have a great day.